Hey there, it's Cass. Today's video is a fun and simple one. We're going to be redrawing this How to Draw book from the How to Draw Manga Redraw challenge. I thought this was super fun and really nostalgic to draw. Anyway, let's hop right into the video. Okay, so in the spirit of this video, I really wanted to talk about my experience as a younger artist and give some tips for beginner artists or people who might just be starting out. Much like these books did, especially this particular series of how to draw books inspired me and helped me learn when I was younger. I really think learning from how to draw books can be a great tool for artists who don't really know where to start, and I know a lot of the basic stuff that I learned from a lot of these how to draw books that I read when I was younger stuck with me for a really long time. But I think it's also really important to learn how to sort of use those resources like drawing books and how to draw tutorials effectively, and also how to branch out from them. So we're going to start with kind of a controversial one, but I think it's actually really important because of how taboo it's sort of become, especially towards young artists. Using reference is really important when learning how to draw, especially if you're just starting to learn how to draw or if you're trying to practice something specific. For example, I love to draw a lot of fantasy-themed art, and I also draw a lot of artwork of characters like my D&D characters or my comic book character Rowan, and all of them carry things like big weapons or swords or axes, and I still sometimes struggle when I'm drawing or designing those weapons. So using reference pictures that I find online to help me understand how to draw them has helped me to break down those shapes within them and then be able to draw them on my own later on without reference. It's sort of like building up a library of information in your head, and that can inform how you draw and help you improve. Sometimes if I'm having a particularly hard time drawing an object or a face or even a pose that I need for a drawing, I'll search around for free stock images and other resources, like asking my friends to pose for me and send me pictures, and then begging them to send me more pictures. And that way I can reference those or even trace over them so I can understand them. Now, I know a lot of you probably just heard me say to trace things and got kind of uncomfortable, but let me explain. Tracing can be super helpful when you're using it as a tool to learn how to draw. I don't think you should be tracing things you intend on selling or tracing things for a piece of published art when it wasn't intended for that use. But even when I was still in art school, we were encouraged to trace the images that we were studying when we were first learning about them to help us understand them. If you can't figure out how a pose works, taking a picture of a similar pose and trying to trace over it while breaking it down into basic shapes can be really helpful. Think of it like doing the steps in a how to draw book, but in reverse. Instead of following an outline to complete a picture, you're taking the picture and creating an outline from it so you can understand how that picture was made. So yeah, use reference and trace things if you're using them to learn how to draw. Then, after you've traced them and you understand how they work, go back and redraw it yourself without tracing it, and see if it improves at all. The next tip I have is something I actually learned while I was in college, but still struggle with myself, and honestly, I probably will continue to struggle with for the rest of my art career. In the studio I was in during college, we all constantly repeated this phrase at each other, and I think a lot of artists, both new and old, can relate to the problem that comes with it. This phrase came up a lot, especially around finals week or whenever there was a big project or painting due. That mantra that we used is finished, not perfect. Now, I'm sure a lot of people like me might have this problem, but especially in the past, I've had a lot of trouble with finishing my own art. I've had countless Paint Tool Sci and Photoshop files sitting on my computer with half-finished sketches, line arts, and even some partially colored pieces that I just eventually kinda gave up on because I couldn't get them just right. Especially when I was in high school, I had a lot of trouble finishing things, and over time when I was in college, I started to adapt to a different mindset. You need to learn to set limits for yourself, and sometimes that can mean doing things like even setting a time limit for yourself. I think it's a good tip to sort of go along with this. A lot of professional artists who draw for a living will work on a schedule, and we have limited amounts of time to finish things. Be realistic, and if you only have an hour to draw that day, don't expect to paint a Picasso painting. But maybe if you pace yourself and there's something small bugging you in that piece of artwork and you know you only have, say, 45 minutes left, you can move on to that eye that looks a little bit wonky in your drawing and then come back to it at the end if you have time. That way you end up with more finished art, even if it's not completely perfect or exactly how you want it. A lot of times I don't have art that comes out exactly the way I want, and honestly, I've started to learn to see that as a good thing. I really used to get bothered by my art not being exactly how I imagined it in my head, and now if a piece isn't coming out the way that I want, I still work hard to finish it and then use it as an opportunity to learn what I shouldn't do next time. That way, if I try to draw something similar, I at least know what not to do. It's a really good tool that's helped me learn a lot and discover a lot about what works in my art style, as well as how to work under a really tight time budget. Tip 3 is oh wow, my voice just cracked and I can't speak English. Alright. Tip 3 is going to seem counterintuitive because of how I just talked about trying to keep moving and pushing through to finish your art, and it also sort of incorporates some pieces from tip 1. When it comes to practicing your art skills, take your time, study. I can't tell you how many times I've seen other artists I know, my friends and people that I've worked with, become discouraged that they didn't figure out how to draw something in the ideal art style that they want overnight, or they get frustrated that they can't draw something without ever having looked at the thing. And you always need to practice. Practice, practice, always practice. Practice the things you hate about your art the most. If you can't draw hands and you hate drawing them because you can never seem to get them right, I should see pages of hands in your sketchbook. Bad hands, wonky hands that don't look right at all. That's okay. I want to see you tracing pictures of hands in your free time so you can understand how to draw them, looking at references of them, learning how to break them down, and practicing drawing really weird hand poses so that way you get the hang of it. The same thing goes for anything else you're trying to learn. Take the time to learn things like anatomy if you want to draw characters, or things like comic books, or perspective if you need to draw backgrounds and work on things like environments. Or practice creating color palettes and color schemes. That's something that I still have to practice all the time because I don't really like how a lot of my coloring looks, and especially my shading. You're not going to get it all figured out on your first try, so if something isn't sticking with you and you think you need to take some time to learn or relearn how to draw something, do it and practice it in a sketchbook or on a sketch dump file on your computer until you get the hang of it. A lot of art is repetitive and it's learning, so treat it like you're learning something. The last tip is also something I really struggle with. I need to take my own advice more now that I'm recording this video. Whoops. It's still really good advice regardless, actually, though, despite my own inability to listen to my own advice. It's good to have other artists you look up to, and artists who inspire you, who make you want to keep drawing, so that maybe one day you can be like them or draw like they can, but please stop comparing yourself to them, especially if you're new to drawing and new to art. If you take the mindset of, well, they're so much better than me, how can I ever catch up? You're setting yourself up for failure. A lot of the artists you love have probably been doing this for a lot longer than you. They have more experience than you. And there's this phrase that I can't quite remember. It's something about comparing your tomorrow to someone else's yesterday or something like that. Basically, you don't have to compare your current ability to draw to someone else's. You're still learning, and whether it takes you 3 months or 3 years, as long as you're practicing, you'll improve. Something you're learning now that you think that you're not very good at and they're super good at, they could have spent years already learning before you ever even tried. Instead of comparing yourself to other artists like that, compare your art now to your art before you practiced whatever it is you've been working on. If you're feeling discouraged, take a piece that you made 6 months ago and compare it to one from a week ago or from right now, the one you're working on. Oftentimes, it's hard to look at other people's art and not compare it to our own, but by doing so, we forget just how far we've come. And that's just as, if not even more important. Just by practicing and drawing as much as you can, you'll improve without even realizing it. Going back and seeing that growth can be really inspiring, and you should inspire yourself. You're doing something really amazing. That's really all for today's video, guys. I hope you found my art tips helpful, and a lot of this stuff was something that I kinda wish I had known or that someone had sent to me when I was younger, so I hope it rings true for you guys too, and maybe helps you guys as you're starting out. Keep your head up and always keep drawing. I'll see you guys in the next